Thank you, Chris. Very much appreciated for the opportunity to come here multiple years in a row now to address the BOOMTOWN conference. And in my previous role, just a few short days ago, we had been an event partner and sponsor in this conference, and proudly do so. And for my acting secretary now, Rod Stables, I'd make the commitment on his behalf publicly that we'd continue to do so. So you can take that up with Mr. Stables. But certainly it's something that we want to do, and it's something certainly that the Premier and Minister Constance would have us do, which is to go about our partnership with the industry, with the community, in exactly that word, in partnering, not in combat, but certainly in collaboration in collegiate nature, and that's certainly what we want to continue doing. So I applaud the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue for this session, and for you, Chris, for leading it. Can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, pay my respects to elders past and present. Can I acknowledge my now former minister, which I'm still having withdrawal symptoms, and I think he is as well somewhat, Minister Constance, the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure. I've had the third year running of being with the Minister, and whenever I hear him speak now, and certainly just then being interviewed, what he has learnt about transport is quite exceptional, and his breadth and depth of knowledge, and as Andrew Cannell just said, he's all over it. He certainly is, and it's a wonderful thing that he continues to drive the transport cluster forward. To all other dignitaries, including the Honourable Duncan Gay, former Minister for Roads, Maritime and Freight, I acknowledge you on being here today. Today my job is simple because I'm now in the very honoured and privileged role of being Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, but it is to talk about transport and to talk about Future Transport 2056. It's all about future-proofing where we go to for the state, and to improve the lives and prospects for the citizens of the great state of New South Wales over to the middle of the decade. So I'll do just that and give you a potted overview of what that new strategy is all about, on transport playing its key role in the delivery of this state's productivity and economy over the next 40 years. So first, the future transport itself is all about responding to growth, responding to the fact that we will have 11, if not 12 million people by the middle of this century. There'll be a doubling almost of the number of trips per day, and there'll be certainly a difference in our age profile as we go forward. The last long-term master plan that we put out in 2012, is only 5 short years ago, put out 700 initiatives to drive, 700 infrastructure initiatives, including policy plans, but certainly getting on with the job of actually driving infrastructure initiatives as well. Of those, pleasingly, 628 of those are either in construction or complete already, and we're incredibly proud of that. And the reason we've actually had to do Future Transport 2056 is because, quite literally, we ran out of context and we needed our next planning horizon, and government gave us permission to think right out to the middle of the century. That aligned us with the Greater Sydney Commission. It also aligned us with Treasury's intergenerational report, which doesn't get much commentary, but it means joined up government, probably for the first time ever, I think, certainly in this jurisdiction, that land use and transport planning are truly integrated, and very proud of the fact that we've been able to work with the Chief Commissioner of the Greater Sydney Commission, Lucy Turnbull, the Chief Executive, Sarah Hill, and my former colleague in the Department of Transport being Claire Gardner-Barnes, the Deputy Secretary of Freight Strategy and Planning, who actually worked together so closely to bring Future Transport together for the very first time. What the plan is and why it's different is it's not just lines on maps. It's certainly a lot more interactive and dynamic this time round. It's digitised. It basically allows us to monitor how we're going and respond as we need to over time. It has a far greater focus on future transport technology embedded in it. We put a digital roadmap of what technology will look like for the next 5 to 10 years. It plays a centrepiece role within the new future transport strategy. It does have a suite of documents that sit within the plan. They cover a whole range of areas, and I'll go through those in a little bit of detail. There is certainly the infrastructure and services plan for the regional area, and I'll focus a little bit on regions, seeing the comments that were made previously. An infrastructure and services plan for the metropolitan area, a road safety plan, a freight and ports plan, a maritime plan, an accessibility plan that covers all areas of endeavour, and indeed a transport and tourism plan. Those sub-plans are very important for various stakeholders and industry groups across the entire economy. They want to know that we're looking after them, and there were various commitments made, including election commitment for a transport and tourism plan. We're very proud of the fact that we actually have that out there now for the community to have a look at right at the moment. The plan itself, in terms of future transport, is around 6 themes. Wouldn't be surprising for the transport sector to say that the first is customer focus. It was surprising 6 or 7 years ago that it was customer focus. It's not anymore. It's part of our DNA that we are customer focused, and that's the first thing you'll see in the plan. Second theme is around successful places and embedding that ethos of successful places. We are a means to an end in transport. We are not an end in itself. A school, a hospital, a recreation facility is the end in itself, and indeed where people live. Growing the economy, unsurprisingly, the transport system that powers an economy that will ultimately hit $1 trillion is underpinned by a great transport system, and one that has to deliver on the growth that we will have. Safety and performance, the hallmarks and underpinnings of any good transport plan. Accessible services, and last but not least, sustainability. Sustainability is about both environmental sustainability, but most importantly, economic sustainability for the state and its well-being. Just wrong way. So if I can just go to the plans themselves. So the Greater Sydney plan first, underpinned by the City of Three Cities from the Greater Sydney Commission, the Eastern Harbour City, which we meet today, the River City around Parramatta, and indeed the focus of Boomtown, the Western Sydney around the Western Sydney Aerotropolis, and the Parkland City that it will be. All incredibly important that we had the privilege that the Greater Sydney Commission laid that out for us and allowed us to respond out to 2056 what transport needs there would need to be for 8 million people in this city. When you have 8 million people, you will have a significant amount of mass transit need. We already have a big Sydney Trains network, and we already have a big uplift coming in terms of timetable that was spoken about before on starting this Sunday. We have 66 k's of metro in place, and as the Minister just pointed out, the plan actually outlines another 200 kilometres of mass transit. It also talks about a whole range of more intermediate transit, whether that be bus rapid transit or light rail. Key point is we were given the mission of outlining what 8 million people would need, how we would need to reshape the city around those 3 cities, how we would plan mass transit networks, whether they be north, south and east, west. And I think we've done a pretty good job in doing that. But we've done a pretty good job in doing that, and I'll go back to the first point in terms of partnering. It's now over to you to have your say about whether we've gotten that right. And knowing the people of New South Wales and the 7.7 people that live here, every single one of them is a transport planner. We all know that, and it's up to you to get involved and have your say. Our say is to be had by the 3rd of December, so if you haven't done so already, get in as of a couple of 100,000 people already and actually tell us what you think about the plans. Equally important, though, is the Regional New South Wales Services and Infrastructure Plan. You'll notice the wording is exactly the same because the focus on Regional New South Wales is just as heavy as it is in the metro area, and we really want to drive that thinking that Regional New South Wales, and for the several million people that live in Regional New South Wales, they have their own plan, their own services and infrastructure focus of attention, just like Sydney. It is not a Sydney-centric plan. I've said it 100 times. Transport for New South Wales is Transport for New South Wales for a reason. It covers the entire state, and there's equal focus both in region and in the metro areas of this state. Covered that. If I just go back to Sydney itself and where we go to and some of the key themes. The north-south connectivity, particularly for the Western Parkland City in itself, does start becoming self-evident, particularly the linkages that we need for Greater Penrith, Blacktown, Liverpool, Macarthur, Campbelltown. There'll be a lot of conversation today, I have no doubt, about north-south rail lines to and from Western Sydney Airport up to the T1 Western line, or indeed east-west connectivity. Certainly the Minister made it very clear that the West Metro, starting with Parramatta to the current CBD, are a real focus. You'll see in the plan that there are many other focuses. As the Minister pointed out, Cogra to Parramatta, Parramatta to Norwest, as links that we'll ultimately need and will need to be looked at in detail through business cases in the future. The amount of reshaping we're able to do with north-south connectivity, and not just that focus we've had for the last 50 years of dragging quite literally millions of people from the west of the city to the east on a daily basis for long commutes. We have had the opportunity to reshape that, to really drive the aspiration of 30-minute city. And the plans themselves that we pointed out take the number of people within a 30-minute city catchment up to about 70%. It won't cover absolutely everyone, we make that very clear, but we get it to about 70%. Whether that means you get to your nearest metropolitan city, or between a metropolitan city and a strategic centre such as Blacktown, Norwest, or indeed the Randwick Health and Education Precinct. That's what the plan's about. The intermediate transport links, you have to go into a fair bit of detail to look at them, but for every part of Sydney and indeed every part of the state, you'll see a lot of focus on those intermediate links. So if you have a view on bus rapid transit, where strategic corridors should or shouldn't be, there are plenty of opportunities to have your say on those. That gives you a more focused detail of what we see as the strategic themes in terms of corridors. But as I say, it's really up to you to now have your say about how we've laid it out. We think we've done a reasonable job, as I said, but plenty of people will tell us otherwise if we don't have that right. In your part of the world, wherever that might be across the entire greater metropolitan area, there is a lot of focus of attention, and the plan and the strategy itself really goes into how we're thinking. Not just lines on maps, though, it's about connectivity, about successful places, as I said, and a real centrepiece of technology to try and drive the next wave of innovation. Regional New South Wales, as I said, a real focus in terms of regional New South Wales. There are billions of dollars in delivery in regional New South Wales right at this point in time, right down to the fine-grained detail. If I just go to one area in the transport cluster, being Roads and Maritime Services, Roads and Maritime Services right at the moment are delivering hundreds and hundreds of projects across the state. Each one of them is tracked. The amount of openings that happen each month are quite incredible, whether that's just a minor intersection piece of work, a local road under the program started by Duncan Gay, being Fixing Country Roads and Fixing Country Rail, which have $500 million in one grant scheme and $400 million in the other. They've allowed us to accelerate, as I said, quite literally hundreds of projects across the state, all are tracked. I'd also point out the fact that in the regional highway space, Pacific Highway is the longest piece of new infrastructure we're delivering at the moment, and we're now really focused on the last component, 155 k's between Woolgoolga and Ballina, and getting on with that final piece of duplication. There have been a couple of openings of duplication between Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour in the last few months, and there'll be more to come in the not too distant future. Same with the South Coast in terms of the Princess Highway. We're turning our attention more and more to that part of the world. The Great Western Highway's just had a lot of openings in the recent past, and there are many more that I could mention. But the focus in the regions going forward will be about acknowledging the diversity of the major cities, and that's what they are: Tamworth, Dubbo, Orange, Bathurst, Wagga, Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie, major cities now in our regions, and they need to be acknowledged, and we want them to become more and more the hub and spoke of those parts of New South Wales. That's how we've set it out. We want people to focus on their commute to and from Orange just as much as they might look over the sandstone curtain to come to Sydney for their services. The health services, the education services that go along with that are what we're thinking about and what we want to get feedback on, but we really want to acknowledge the ongoing importance of those regional hubs, because to the surprise of many, it's growing. Regional New South Wales is growing, and that's something that we want to back in like never before. That gives you a feel for how we see things. In days gone by, that would simply be lots of blue lines heading in and out of Sydney. We really want to reshape that dynamic. Even if I pointed out Dubbo, Orange and Bathurst, they're 206 kilometres apart, those three great cities. They have a population of well over 100,000 people. They are a power base in and of themselves. We want to acknowledge that. We want to make sure the transport links to and from those locations to all of the villages and towns around those locations are well supported, and the Urana region's economy booms around those cities. Similar with the Riverina around Wagga and Albury, similar with the North Coast, and really reflecting the power bases that those regions are in and of themselves, and us focusing a lot more of our transport in and around those areas, getting those local connections, which are the green lines, as a focus of our attention just as much as connectivity to and from Sydney. In the plan itself, there are committed projects, and many of them, 0 to 10 years. There's plenty for investigation in the 10 to 20 years, and lots of visionary lines in there about where we go to for the 20 to 40 years out to 2056. The key point I would make is for investigation in the 10 to 20 year areas, if you're looking for where the policy and planning contest is, it's in that space. You will all have an opinion on what to do next, and you should express that opinion forcefully to us. We certainly have pointed out what we see as the next wave of transport projects. In that committed space, if we did nothing else right now, we continue to build at a very fast pace right out to the middle of the 2020s. The next components and the next priorities, whether that be West Metro, the connectivity to Western Sydney Airport, whether it's upgrading the east-west connections in regional centres, they be the Golden Highway, the Great Western Highway, the Kings Highway, and improving connectivity east-west across the great state of New South Wales. They're the areas where we want to hear from people because, as I said, we've put it out there in partnership to collaborate with you and get your views, and we want to do just that. That's how you provide your feedback. Just to try and do things a little bit differently, we even use terms like a react to the future. We've used terms like that, and we've used emojis, and we've gone online, and we've used apps and all those type of things. So you'd all probably snigger a little bit, but then go and tell your kids so they could actually get online and get connected. My daughter said to me that when I showed her what this looked like, she said, if you've planned out to 2056, I'm assuming there are kids yet to be born who will be still delivering that plan. That's quite a thing. We'll all jump ahead and work out what things might look like in 2056, and we might all have a bit of passion about thinking we should have a say in that, and certainly you should. If you're from the state of New South Wales, you certainly should. So react to what we've had to say, because we are laying out plans for close to 12 million people for the entire state, 8 million people for Sydney, and therefore it shouldn't be us alone who are dictating to you what that looks like. So certainly get in if you haven't already by the 3rd of December and let us know your views. Lastly, I'll close with the acknowledgement of how doing things differently has helped us. I will bring the same drive and energy we've had in the transport cluster to the centre of government. I'm honoured to work for Premier again, Gladys Berejiklian. I've certainly enjoyed 4 years of working with her as Transport Minister, and I'm delighted to come full circle for myself and work with her again to drive that same urgency and delivery across all areas of the New South Wales government. There's just a massive agenda to deliver. Transport has been doing that in a very, very firm fashion over the last 6 or 7 years, and we want to continue doing that across all areas. But in transport, the key lesson learnt is the collaboration between the Greater Sydney Commission, Department of Planning and the Future Transport team. They co-located out at Parramatta. They worked in an office together. That worked fantastically well. They had a group who was very dynamic and wouldn't say no in terms of how they went about their business. Transport actually took a complementary role, a facilitation role, so the Greater Sydney Commission could take the leading role in terms of the shape of this city. We will only do that more and more because it allowed government to give us permission to think about things right out to the middle of the century. It allowed you to engage with us in different ways to try and outline what we thought was the best shape of the city for the next 40 years and the state for the next 40 years. And indeed, for the focus of Boomtown, I'd hope that the deliberations today focus in on Western Sydney, as it absolutely should, and you look and use as a backdrop what we've outlined there together in a spirit of collaboration across the GSC and transport, and use that as an area of debate, contest of what we should do next, because I have no doubt speaker after speaker will talk about the infrastructure pipeline we need next, how we'll fund and finance it, what we should do with digital, what we should do with autonomous vehicles, when they will come onto the system, and all manner of other areas of debate. That's why we've put it out there, but we think we've got quite a detailed plan that gives you an opportunity to use that as a backdrop for debate and contest, and that's what will give us the confidence over the next 3 to 6 months of taking that back into government with the knowledge that you've been consulted, you've given us your views firmly, because the government will expect no less than that, and we can take that back with confidence and say, we think we've got it right. We've certainly consulted very heavily, listened a lot, and ensured that we've got a final plan after we've had this draft out for consultation, a final plan that we can stand behind, knowing that the industry and all of our partners have had their say and given us their views, and we can take that back with us and finalise what we think is a very good product for the people of New South Wales over the next coming decades. With that, I'll wish you well for the rest of the conference. I'm delighted to be here, as I said, for multiple years in a row. It's a fantastic event, and I applaud again the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue and Chris Brown for running it, and running it so well and drawing such a good crowd. Thank you.